Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. Wow, we have made it through another day. We are almost done. We've got this last session, and for those of you that have been here, how many have been here for all 3 sessions? Right on, troopers. And then how many have been to one other session with us? Great. Okay, so anybody that's never been to any session? Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys about us a little bit first. So bear with me, the other guys.
Just close your ears. You've heard this term.
Yeah. So I'm Kim Lennox. I'm from Adaptive Path, and I'm a senior interaction designer. And this is my colleague, Dan Harrelson, and he is a senior technologist. And we work together on designing user experiences. And so these things can be mobile, web, they can be cross-channel, all kinds of different things. That's specifically what Adaptive Path does, is really working as a design consulting firm on helping our different clients solve really hard experience design problems. So we end up getting the challenging, gnarly ones, generally. The easy stuff, you know, of course, you guys don't need to get somebody from the outside to help you, but the tough problems, sometimes you just get stuck. You can't get through it. And so having a consulting firm come in and help clear those things the thing that's great about consulting is that you guys all know, if you're on an internal team, you all know the same stuff, but having a consulting firm come in to say what you've been saying all along, somehow it gets done. I've worked as an internal consulting for Samsung. I was on a design team. And man, we would say the same thing that IDEO said, but they listened to IDEO. I mean, it was just so frustrating. So now I'm on the other side. Now I'm doing the consulting side, and it's really fun to help teams move things forward, because you guys all have it down. But it's great to be there to help you. So what we're going to talk about today is design methods. So this is part of a 4-day workshop that Adaptive Path does. And this is part of the Interaction Design Day. And what we're going to focus on is really the whole process. So this is kind of a flow diagram of how we go about doing our work. And today, what I'm going to talk about in the next hour is really focusing on how do you pick and choose your methods. We have all of these different things that we can do. Which ones do we choose? And how is it that you have a certain process? What's appropriate for that process? What's appropriate for the problem at hand? Do you do the same process over and over and over? Do you really need to do a persona every single time? Maybe not. Do you need to do first-person research every single time? Maybe not. So this is going to help you guys figure out which things you pick and choose from. So the first thing about design is that design is about constraints. As designers, we focus on whatever the problem is that we're trying to solve. There is a design constraint. There is something there. It's a business, it's schedule, it's technological, something. And Charles Eames, who is a modern furniture designer, has basically summed it up really well. He said that each problem has its own particular list. So when you think about that, and then you think about our set processes that we've got A, B, C, and we've got these gates, gated processes that we have to get through. But if our design problem has its own particular list, why are we going through the same process each and every time? It just doesn't make sense. We have to modify our process each time and pick and choose the tools and techniques that we use based on the problem at hand. And so in doing that, what we look at is the constraints. First and foremost, we consider what those constraints are. And so they're business, they're technological, they're the skills available, all kinds of different types of constraints.
So I haven't done this yet. I'm kind of curious. I didn't do this in the other sessions. Raise of hands, who here considers themselves more of a developer and engineer versus a designer? That's me. Good. So maybe about 30% or so. The rest of you, I consider, I would assume that you consider yourself more of a UX, a designer type person.
But hands for the UX? I just want to see. Yeah, it's about a third.
Cool. So, if you are more on the developer engineer side of things, you understand the world of constraints. It's nothing new to you. Maybe you don't think of it in the same way that maybe your UX designer does. But you understand that you can only build things so big or so fast. You have to pick and choose what is the best architecture that you're going to dive into. You know the constraints of whatever programming language your group already uses. You can't break out of those kind of constraints. It's the same thing when we're working on figuring out what are the best methods to go about creating a great user experience. We have to look at the constraints that we have and pick what's going to be the best given what I know.
So when you're assessing the constraints, the other thing you need to consider is making sure that you have a clearly defined objective. So when you get a project, even if you're in an internal team, and you're told that this is what you have to execute on, if you talk to stakeholder A, stakeholder B, stakeholder C, a lot of times they all have a different story. And they will tell you that you're supposed to be building something different, each person. So how do you resolve that? Well, the thing that we do, first and foremost, is have stakeholder interviews. We actually talk to people separately, one-on-one. You don't do it in a group because everybody's going to listen to the boss, and they're not going to really tell you the truth. When you get one person alone in a room, they start just giving you all the, oh man, I'm so frustrated, and I got to do this, and then there's that, and you hear that there's no alignment in what they're actually trying to build. So if that's the problem, then if you don't have a clear objective, how are you going to build the thing? Because everybody's doing something different. Nobody knows what the priorities are. So it's really important to have a clearly defined objective. And some of that means that you need to focus on doing some strategy work ahead of time. So we had a client in Cambridge, and we flew out there for a week. We were doing stakeholder interviews. First 2 meetings, we figured out that there was a problem. Huge, huge problem. We talked to the CEO the third time, he was the third person, and we said, we got to get you guys in a room. And so we gathered everybody in a room and got them to start talking, and they were just politely, gingerly talking around the problem and around the problem. It took us 3 months to convince them that they actually needed to do real design strategy work. So now they had us coming in to do user experience. And we said, stop, second interview, you're not ready for user experience. You got to do some design strategy. And they said, well, just do the UI and we'll figure out the strategy. We'll figure out the brand later. Just keep building the UI. That's throwaway work. So we did the UI, and the whole time we were hammering home, you got to do the strategy, you got to do the strategy. And so 3 months later, they have a UI that is not applicable to the objectives because they have different types of hardware, they have different types of constraints that they weren't giving us ahead of time. So if we had that clearly defined objective through the design strategy, we wouldn't have had to waste those 3 months. They realize that now, and we're actually engaged currently on a design strategy project with them. And then eventually we will go back and do the UI. So sometimes you just have to, put a stop to it and focus on getting the objective right. The other thing that's really important is you need to be realistic with your requirements. It's so frustrating to have a list of requirements and you want to get it all in, right? Guy Kawasaki actually has this great podcast up on IT Conversations, I think it is. And it's something about innovation, like 11 steps to innovation or something about that. Number 5 is my favorite. He uses the song from Bobby McFerrin, Don't Worry, Be Happy. You know that song? And he says, don't worry, be crappy. And you think about it, it's like, well, no, we have to innovate. We have to be number 1. We have to be the best. No, his idea is that do some amazing stuff. Do some good stuff, but then you're going to have a mixture of crappy. You're going to have to prioritize your requirements. When you think about the Macintosh, when they first delivered it, there was no hard drive. There was no software. They focused on the user experience. They focused on a graphical user interface that was absolutely unheard of at that time. They focused on that, and then if they had waited for a hard drive, they might not have shipped. Another competitor might have gotten into the marketplace. So you have to have a mix of really good stuff and some crappy in order to actually get your products out into the market. The other thing that you need to focus on is defining the deliverables. And so what I do is I talk to my engineering team or my clients and find out what is it that they want me to deliver and how do they want it delivered. Is it specs? Is it a prototype? Am I coming up with something that's that I need to share with the chairman so that we can, get more funding. Is it a vision prototype? Or is it, something that's really nuts and bolts? And so whatever that final thing is that I'm working on, I work backwards, and I end up doing what I call time chunking. And so I figure out by phase, what are the deliverables that I want by phase? What are the outcomes that are needed to move things forward? So if I need a prototype at the end to hand to the engineers and some annotated wireframes, that's the thing at the very end, then that means that I need to have maybe 6 weeks to build a prototype, right? Then I need to have another couple weeks, maybe a month or so, to do the wireframing. And then I need, and you back up to today. And when you get to today, you suddenly say, oh, I don't have time for research. I'm going to have to do secondary research. Or, well, we don't know the user, so we're going to actually do the research ahead of time, and we're actually going to make a lightweight prototype. We're going to do paper prototyping instead of an actual interactive prototype. So you weigh all of those things. Rather than just always churning out the same type of deliverable every time, you pick and choose. You actually talk to the engineers, and you find out what do they want. Who is the audience that this is going to? Is it to the engineers, or is it to the executives? You need to polish it appropriately. So this is kind of my general bucket list of all the different tools and techniques and methods that I use. And at the bottom here are the outcomes. So in the blue part there, that's the outcomes. And I'm not saying that each phase is, delineated. You would only do, shadowing in research. You could do it at any time. So there's like this mixture that can happen. But I laid it out like this, so that you could actually see it all. Otherwise, it would fall off the screen. So when you look at this, you think, well, do I do all of that for every project? Hell no. There's some things that have to be chosen and some things that are set aside. So a recent project that we did, all the stuff in gray we didn't bother with. We picked the different techniques for this particular project. We were really focused on, we had to understand the mobile experience. And so we did this crazy thing. We had a internet deprivation study. This was great. We actually made the people stop using the internet for a week and handed them a mobile phone and said, that's your internet access. That's it. Go for it. It was amazing. Talk about finding pain points, talk about finding frustrations, because we had did this really in-depth study with them to understand how is the mobile experience for web working and not working. And we couldn't have done that just by, doing some secondary research. We found all these great things because we forced that situation.
I did not volunteer. I'm not going to go a week without the web.
It was amazing how people, we gave them cheat cards as well. They had, I think it was 4 hours total for that week that they could actually cheat, and they had to tell us ahead of time, they had to tell us when they were cheating. And, the stuff that they were cheating on, like Perez Hilton, come on. That was how they were cheating, It wasn't like they were balancing their checkbook or anything. No, it was, Perez. So it was a really fun study. It was great. But so when you look at the things that we did choose, one of the things that was really important for this particular client was that this was a concept that was going to be several years before they were going to launch. And so we were handing this to them, and then it was gone. We don't get to foster it. We don't get to talk to them. It's gone. And so one of the things that we made sure that we included was design principles. We gave them a list of principles so that a year from now, when they're actually building the thing, then once it's made it through all the gates, that they have those tenets, that they have those principles that they're going to be able to focus on and go back to and say, oh, right, these were the things that were valuable. And so, again, we just, depending on the project, you pick and choose the technique that's appropriate. So how do we choose those tools? First of all is available skills.
Yeah, you need to think about, who's on your team? Who's going to be doing this? Is it that it's going to be you and maybe a couple people in management? Is it that you have a full UX team? Are you bringing in, a consulting company like Adaptive Path? What do you have on hand to throw at this problem. Based on that, you can identify, what is it that we're going to tackle, what are we going to do. I work a lot towards the end of these processes where we're dealing with things like a final deliverable, a prototype, that kind of stuff. And frequently, I have to look at, what skills do I have on hand? Do I have somebody who can bang out a flex prototype? Do I have somebody who can just work on HTML, CSS? What do we have available? Of course, you counter that with time as well. What time do we have? But that's definitely one of the ways you want to think about it. Is who do we have? Do we have researchers? Do we have the skills available to be able to tackle the processes that we want to dive into?
The other thing is team culture. So when I started at Samsung several years ago, I had just left Leapfrog. And so at Leapfrog, it's a children's educational product company. And so I was working on the Leapster, which is this interactive game for kids. And the software that I was designing was specification level designs. I had elaborate audio scripts and visual scripts and just, every single detail down to the very pixel I had to describe because the engineers had to build it. And there was this whole information system, the way they used Word and exported to Excel, and it was very elaborate, very detailed. So when I got to Samsung, I was still in this mindset of spec, design, detail, annotate. Everything has to be really explicit, really important. It didn't make any sense because I was working in the advanced concept area of Samsung. The first project that I worked on was something for 2008, and that was back in 2004. You don't need specs to deliver that far out. And my manager kept telling me, you're going too detailed, lighten it up, bring it up, way too detailed. And so I kept doing it. I was so proud of my document. I had this beautiful 80-page annotated wireframe document, and it's just brought it to Korea. My first time to Korea, handed the document to them, and they said, thanks very much, and they never read it. They never looked at it. They looked at the prototype that I brought. Thank God I had a flash prototype. They looked at the prototype, but they're not going to bother with it because 3 years later, when they actually start building it, technology is different, interaction models are different. What I was supposed to be delivering was a vision of what this advanced concept could do, how it could be appropriate in users' homes, and how North American consumers would actually want to use this particular product. Those were the types of things that I should have been focusing on. So from that time, the next project that I worked on at Samsung was much more higher level. And because of the language barrier, I stopped annotating. They're not going to read it. Literally, English is their second language, and there's usually 1 out of 10 people in the room that actually spoke English that would do the translation for me. So they're not going to read those documents. So I got into a lot of modeling. I did a lot of data visualization and big ideas, big broad strokes rather than down to the details. So what does the team culture that you're working with want? Think about that before you start building out and wasting your time on annotated wireframes if they don't need them. And the other thing that is really critical is modifying your process. This is what Adaptive Path does. We don't have a set process. We had a attendee at a workshop a while back that said, I'm an X shop, and the X is another design consulting firm that has like a set process, and they are like very rigid in their process. And I said, that's great. They said, what is your process? And I said, well, it depends on the problem. What are we trying to solve here? What are the constraints? Who's the audience? How is it going to be built? When is it going to be built? So when you think about it, when you put all those constraints into place and all the requirements into place, you need to modify your process. You can't have this one rigid thing. And how many of you guys are shoehorning in stuff that just doesn't fit to the existing software? Your software process. Is anybody stuck with this? Or are you guys all happy with your process? Just 2 guys are frustrated with their process. All right, well, I'm done. I just can't emphasize enough that modifying your process is the way to go. And the thing that's great about it is that it gives you a chance to do something different and keep yourself excited, keep yourself on your toes, not get bored of cranking out the same thing over and over and over. And that's the other thing that I do is on every project, I make sure that at least one project team member is learning something new. Not something little, but something big. We have to keep moving ourselves forward. And so on the current project right now, I have a project manager, brilliant project manager. She's never been a PM for software. And at the stakeholder interviews, she had no idea what we were talking about. We were client-side this and server that and in the cloud and whoop, all over her head. She's learning, and that's okay. And we're setting aside time to actually, she has this list of all the geeky words that we use, and it's the what the hell is this meeting? And so we meet on a weekly basis on the what does this mean? And because she's learning. And so the thing that's important when you have somebody that's on your team that's learning, you need to allow time for them to learn. You need to allow time for them to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. You're not going to learn anything if you don't make mistakes. So you have to allow for some amount of time. If somebody's learning Flash for the first time, don't put them, on the most important thing, because they're just going to be staying up all night working on it. Give them a senior person that they can talk to that can send them some code bits to help them along the way. Give them some prototypes that have already been built so that they can pick it apart and figure out how it was done before. So that's pretty much it for the talk.
It's your turn to learn something
And now
new.
it's your turn. Okay, everybody, let's go up to the front of the room here, all the way to the front to the speaker near.
Who's going to speak to yours? Everybody, come on over. We got to gather around. You can't see him from there.
Yeah, you're not
Get
going
off
to
your
fall
bus.
asleep. This is not your nap time.
Come on.
Stand up. We're
Over
going to
here.
get up here and walk over here. This is to keep you guys from surfing the internet and taking a nap.
I don't think we need the video up.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the video is going to work.
And go.
Okay, so our topic was a persona. I don't know who of you is familiar with a persona or what it is. So why would we use this? A persona is normally used to describe the interests, needs, habits, the environment, our target groups for the application or the website we are going to develop for. And it outlines how these people or these specific target groups, how they look like. So there are pictures on there from their environment, maybe from their cars or from their children or what they're wearing. So to give you an idea of how the target group you're addressing to develop an application for is looking like, what they're interested, what their expectations are. So it's like an outline of this target group.
I don't know. I'm going to ask.
What are the outcomes? Normally it's a poster, but it can also be a PowerPoint presentation or 3D personas. So you have like puppets where you say, okay, this is Mr. X or Mrs. Y. And yeah, could be a puppet. Mainly it's posters, but we also could say it's a real person. So you put stickers on these person and you say, okay, you are Mr. X and you have these and these and these stickers on, which are different behaviors, or you have to dress in this and this, so you have to disguise, for example.
Who creates them?
Pardon?
Who creates them? Who makes personas?
Who makes personas?
Yes.
Normally within the design team, for example, it's the user experience architect or the information architect or the conceptualist. So there are different jobs, names.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's also the designer. And when in the process, it's quite early in the process, so it's in the research phase actually when you create these. But you will use them through the whole process. Very often they hang at the wall, so all the people from the project team, which brings me to the next topic, who is the audience. So it's mainly the whole project team, because it's important for everybody, for developers as well as for designers, and also for the clients. So you show these to the clients if these are the right target groups or if they had to add anything. And as a core tool, it's mainly the user experience architect or the information architect or the designer who is going to use it later on. So they really have to work with it to develop the user experience architecture, for example.
Good. I want to make sure we have enough time for everyone to talk. Yeah. So let's do the next persona group.
Yeah. We did one persona, and we came up with XAML.
Great.
XAML. It's our IT. It's in it. So it's quite young, 3 years, and so this is the outline of this persona.
Good job.
So, very nice.
Thank you.
Okay,
teamwork.
The other personas here, who else did that? I brought the paper over. You guys want to do a brief? Was there anything different? Was there,
Not especially. I think the main difference was...
Grab the mic.
Yeah.
The main difference was we tried to walk through everything and talk about, what were the actual reasons for it above and beyond. There's this trying to dissociate it from a user test. This is actually a quick snapshot of a person. And so I thought the best way to actually say this quick snapshot was if you read at the bottom, it talks about who this person is. And we just made this one. Her name is Joanne Smith. She's 34, but keep in mind, she'll tell you she's actually 30. She has 3 kids, all of whom are precocious. Her father, Sam, had a stroke about 5 years ago. I worked in healthcare. And she helps her mom take care of them on occasion. Now, as such, her time is filled with ferrying children back and forth to activities and helping her mom with home care. Now, she enjoys paying bills online, but worries about her children's safety when chatting. Now, when she has extra time, she enjoys scrapping with her mom and, of course, watching Desperate Housewives. This is how we perceive, and this is the best way to do a persona, and that is not the abstract, but the story. And the story is what generates the empathy that you need to actually make the persona work. Awesome. So that was the best way of presenting it.
So the difference here is it's not about demographics. It's not about statistics. It's about giving you this, feeling of who this person is. So like you said, the empathy that you can, get from who that user is. And sometimes personas are an amalgamation of a number of research subjects that we've talked to. Personas are generating personas is definitely a skill, and they're very challenging to actually create. And so it's one of those things where you can start with them, and then they will evolve oftentimes over time as you do more research, as you evolve the product. But it's a great place to start by just generating who is the user. Start there. And then you can, evolve your personas into something that has this story that has, really nice emotive qualities, because you suddenly, feel for this person, right? You have a bit of understanding about her, the medical needs, and so if there's like a medical website, you understand how she can actually use that website. Great.
Thank you.
So is there anybody else that is hot to share their really cool technique? Otherwise, I'm going to just go down the line here. So anybody want to share a particular, an aha? Come on, you guys.
Just pick one.
All right, so we're going to go on to ethnography then, which was just here. So who did this lovely ethnography? I love the drawing. Stick figures, see, they work.
This is a team effort, the drawing. So ethnography is really we say here, the study of people to understand their behaviors, motivations, and identify their pain points. So the diagram that we have here shows, a researcher here out in the wild viewing people in the context of their work. So usability research takes people out of the context of where they actually use the products that we create for customers. And ethnographic research goes into their lives and really helps you understand not only who the people are, which generates things like personas, but also the context of where they're using them and the process that they go through for using them. So we generate things like a task list, a customer model, an archetype, so that what all that stuff does is it just gives you a big picture of how people behave with your products. Again, it's not it's very different from demographics, which is more of a quantitative analysis of your customers, whereas ethnographic is very much qualitative, what are people doing and how do we categorize and group that information together. What it avoids is a lot of the same things that personas help to avoid. So one of them is self-referential design. So if we're observing people, in this case is a mom talking on her cell phone, pushing a baby stroller at the park, the way she uses her cell phone is very, very different from the way you or I would use our cell phone, let's say at the MIX conference, where we're like blogging on our phones and posting things to Flickr. She's really not doing that. She's probably chatting to one of her friends or, talking to someone, making an appointment for something. So really, by understanding the behavioral aspects of product usage, you can, basically make sure that your assumptions are correct about who your users are and what they're going to be doing with your product. And then also identifying their pain points. So part of ethnography is not only observation, but also interviewing. So at the very beginning, you want to just stand back and just watch. How are people using the products today? But then you'll want to actually talk to them and get more information about, why did they do something, or what did they think about that experience that they had.
One of the things that I saw throughout the activity was they started with this. They generated this diagram. Isn't that beautiful? Little ethnography, what's, when's, why's, and they just broke it all out. So really nice way of visualizing it in a team setting and being able to just add things as you're discussing it. So rather than everybody working on individual pieces of paper, this was a great way of sharing as you're working. So I thought that was really nice as well. Bonus points there.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Good job. So now let's do usability testing. I know there was another ethnography, but I thought it was interesting that he was talking about that you're observing the user, and then now we're observing the users as well with usability testing, but it's very different. So whose stuff is this? Who wants to talk about usability testing?
Well, I can try. Usability is about making sure that your users can accomplish their tasks in an efficient and effective way. So this is not a very usable presentation, but if we just went by questions on the sheet, and when we recommend that it's done continuously. So even when you have your initial mock-ups, do some sort of testing against your target group. The results of the usability testing, the impact of it can be modifications, of course. You may realize after your usability test that you have completely missed the mark and you need a significant redesign, but hopefully it's just going to be minor modifications as you do your testing. Format of results could be PowerPoint presentations, video recording, which brings us into how you actually conduct the usability test. Mm-hmm. And we thought that it was important not just to write down what you see in a usability test, but record and not rely on people's feedback, because they may not even be aware of what their issues are.
And usability testing is often done in a lab setting, right, where the person is taken out of their normal day-to-day life, and then you kind of try to create that, especially if it's a computer experience you might have, setting up an office environment or setting up a home environment, and observing them that way. But it's not ethnography, which is where they're actually doing they're living their lives and you're observing them. This is you've removed them from their natural settings, and the target is much more specific to the actual software, as opposed to understanding who the user is. This is understanding how the user is actually working with your software.
And then I think the final, there's more stuff, but the final thing that may be worth mentioning is we had a discussion about how difficult it can be to identify the user. And not only may you not realize who the user will be, but there could be all kinds of reasons why you don't have access to the right users, whether political or just practical issues. So you end up with people representing the users, and that can be an issue.
So personas can actually help that in you can identify your personas, and then you can actually use your personas to write your screener. Screeners are so critical. The screeners is basically a list of criteria that the research group will, when they do the phone calls, they'll go through and say, do you meet this criteria? Some of it's demographic stuff, and then, you have to have a variety of different questions for them to go through. And so that helps you narrow down. But it is often difficult, especially for projects that I've worked on in the mobile space. It's very challenging because there's so many research firms that are doing stuff for the web. They don't have a lot of data on mobile. And so trying to find somebody who has the mobile, like asking the right questions for mobile is a totally different thing. So it's definitely a challenge to get your screeners right and find the right people, which is why you need to have a larger data set. If you can get 12 people, maybe half of those, maybe 8 of those will be good, right? That would be great if you can get 8 good ones. And the other ones just fall, they're scamming the system, they're, they missed the mark and, whatever. But that way you can actually see patterns with those 8 people that are actually really good subjects. You can actually see where the problems are.
Great. Thank you.
Good stuff.
We only have time for one more.
Okay.
So does anyone want to volunteer? Anybody
Come on, you guys.
really have one that they're proud
There
of?
we go. All right.
All right, we got the one.
I heard a lot of people who had questions about competitive review, so
There you go.
volunteered.
Great.
So he did the additional challenge.
Walk on over, everybody.
The additional challenge
Get close.
of making it a comparative review, which I think is the only really valuable way to do competitive review. The whole idea here is to identify
Hold the mic up a little closer.
identify competitors to the product that you're proposing to do or that you are improving, so that you can inform your design cycle. So it's to identify gaps in the competition and to compare multiple solutions to the space that you're thinking about. And the goal is to leapfrog that design, not to just match feature for feature in your own design, but to leapfrog it, change the game. Outcomes, consumer reports like comparison chart, which is what I kind of drew here against the metrics. We do task-based heuristic evaluations or expert reviews on each competitor. And you get screenshots, navigation diagrams, and other information about the designs. One thing we have another group in the company that does business intelligence, so they do competitive analysis for our sales force to sell against. This is to get design data out, and often that other kind of competitive analysis doesn't get that data out for you. When to use, it's early in the process and during project inception, during the research phase. Who's the audience? Basically everybody downstream who's going to be inventing that solution. Designers, architects, developers, product managers. How to perform it? Well, define the objective of the comparison first. Define what you're going to be measuring each of them against. A comparison isn't very useful if you can't say what's better or worse. Baseline with one solution. It might be your own that you're improving. If you don't have one yet, you'd be picking one of the competitors to be the baseline. Getting access to the competitors is often a challenge, especially if you're not in a public website space. We're in a vertical market and automation industry. Some of the products are $50,000, and our competitors don't give us a discount. So, define a set of tasks for the comparison. Define the best practices, design best practices that you're going to be comparing them against. Do the comparison, capture the screens, develop models that express each of them. Evaluate each independently. Don't do this step and compare it across. Look at each as if you're a user of that tool independently, as if you're looking at it as the best product. And then you do comparison across the results of each of those evaluations. Draw conclusions to priorities, get your summary metrics, and capture ideas. You're going to get design ideas throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Don't operationalize them yet, but capture them somewhere. Put them in a parking lot. I also put another section in here in cautions. Protect your competitors' intellectual property. You can't steal their trademarks, their designs, and all this other stuff. So be sure that you've got ways of doing that. Again, don't just match features. Find ways to leapfrog them. And then use other user research. If all you're doing is seeing what your competitors think your users and your space do, they might all be wrong, right? So go out and do the other techniques to fill that in.
Yeah, really good stuff. Thank you.
Great.